Welcome to the Athlete Brand Advisor Podcast, featuring advice and interviews about athlete branding. Learn how marketing, public relations, and broadcasting can grow your brand. We also have special episodes to talk about recent news, events, and anything in the world of sports. The podcast is sponsored by Pliable, a versatile marketing, PR, and broadcasting company that identifies opportunities and creates tailored content for its clients. Now it's time to roll. Here's your host, Greg Glenn.
Thanks and welcome to the Athlete Brand Advisor Podcast, where we're always ready to roll. If you're looking for insights and advice on athlete branding, you're in the right place. In this episode, we're going to be talking about advice for college athletes and life after sports. And today's guest is Colin Cook. I know Colin from our time together as students at Quinnipiac University, and it's a small world. Colin actually went to Lawrence Academy with a good childhood friend of mine in Steve Wood. The number of floor hockey games that I played against Woody in my basement are too many to count. Colin and I recently reconnected because of our careers, and I'm so excited to have him share his story with you today. He is a self-described Cyber Security Geek, Triathlon Coach, Wellness Center owner, Triathlon Club President, podcaster, competitive Age Group Ironman Triathlete, and most importantly, a dad. Colin, welcome to the podcast.
Great to be here, Greg. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. As we come into this episode, I was really excited to talk with you because you hit on a lot of things in our conversation before this podcast that a lot of athletes go through, especially coming out of college. And, you know, now with name, image, and likeness, everyone's looking to try and benefit and try and figure out who they are and what their story is. And, you know, years ago, there were athletes that would come out of college and, you know, they'd be looking for their career, where to start, what to do. And when the athletic side of things didn't play out to go pro or maybe go overseas, that's a difficult transition. So I wanted to start with your time at Quinnipiac as an athlete. You were a backup, really goalie, but talk to me about your experience as an athlete there and how you looked at your time at Quinnipiac.
Sure. So yeah, it was a great experience, you know, despite being a third string goalie. So you know, goalie certainly is tough, right? You got to kind of find the right circumstances and, you know, but being behind two goalies that were clearly better than me and that I recognized, you know, made it a little bit easier to accept than somebody that maybe felt like they should be getting more time, you know, and, you know, I'll say both of those goaltenders went on to play, you know, in the AHL and, you know, played some pro. So it justified it a little bit more, but, you know, goalies certainly have our uniqueness, but you know, I got really got along with everybody on the team, but especially those two guys, and they helped me get better, and I think I helped them get better. And you know, I recognized my role for most of my time at Quinnipiac, but it was a lot of fun, and you know, well, we'll talk about some other things that happened there, and you know, with it potentially where I kind of started heading the wrong direction, but at the same time, you know, it was amazing time in my life that you know, I'm very proud of.
You know, I thought it was interesting in looking back at this, Colin. One game, 4 minutes and 50 seconds was your Quinnipiac career. And I thought to myself, man, Colin put in all this time. I know the time you guys put in the weight room. I know all the time, the effort, the practices, the travel, the academics. And I thought to myself, that's even more impressive in a way, in some ways than some others that, you know, they have the opportunity to play and maybe they don't maximize their career or their potential. But for you to do that, I thought was really impressive. By the way, for those of you scoring, he did have a perfect goals against average and save percentage. So that goes to your credit. So talk to me a little bit, Colin, like you mentioned here, what happened at Quinnipiac that kind of was different for you?
Well, so I mean, again, you know, expectations were reasonable, I think there, you know, so knowing I was heading into a situation with two very, very good goalies and, you know, Coach Pecknall was very upfront with me about that. So, you know, I realized what I was going into. You know, I guess to kind of take a quick step back on that, I certainly had the opportunity, could have played Division III somewhere and things like that. But, obviously great to have had an opportunity to experience Division I college hockey. And, but, as a third string goalie, college times, I certainly like to have my fun, and I think had a little too much fun with the opportunities I had by knowing that I wasn't going to be playing.
Right. I was going to say, because that changes things a little bit, for sure, and especially kind of as a goalie, like you said, third string, you kind of were able to relax a little bit more than most, and know that you might not be called on the next day, even if somebody went down. There was at least a guy in front of you. So tell me how that kind of went, because that made you think a little bit differently and maybe get involved in some activities.
Well, yeah, I mean, at that point, certainly knew I wasn't going to the NHL, which, was certainly my dream my whole life, right? And what I was kind of aspiring for and playing hockey, my entire life, and that always being my kind of top priority. Those things start to settle in, and, you want to have the college experience, right? And like you said, you're certainly devoting a lot of time to the gym and on the ice. And, one thing I loved actually about, being a D1 athlete, or at least our setup, is we had open ice, the hour before practice, and we practiced for 2 hours, then we had the ice an hour after. And there was legitimate, lots of times I was out there at least 3 hours, usually closer to 4 hours a day.
Wow.
Which, coach loved, because it gave the shooters, an opportunity to shoot on a goalie if they want to put in some extra time. So there was some great aspects to that, but, definitely, let's just say there wouldn't have been too hard to smell some alcohol on me a few times on those Friday morning pre-game skates and things like that.
Yeah. So, like you said, then there's the transition, right? So you come out of Quinnipiac and you're thinking about where are you going? What are you doing?
Yeah. So, it's very difficult, I think, especially when you've been competitive your entire life and you're so used to that structure of, yes, I got practice, whether it's every day or, a couple times a week. And that's really what drives you to be, motivated to do what you want to do. And when that, sure, there's your career and, trying to make a lot of money, whatever your post season goals are, per career, I should say, goals are. But I certainly was very lost at that point. I was kind of, again, really thinking about, like, it was official now. I wasn't going to the NHL. I wasn't where really I dreamed I would be at that point, right? So being around, especially in a small town that I grew up in, going back home, I did have surgery on my shoulder right after school, and kind of just fell back into took advantage, I guess, of the opportunity that a lot of people around me just rely a lot on drugs and alcohol. And, I fell into that pretty quickly and was stuck there for a few years, really.
Yeah. So that happens to you. Like you said, many athletes have this kind of happen because they're a little bit lost, as we said. Now, the question is, what did you do to try and rectify this situation?
Well, so I like to say my endurance career started actually about 3 a.m. on a Saturday night. So quite intoxicated, among other things. And I was actually down at my brother's house, and with some of my buddies as well. And I said, I'm going to run the Boston Marathon this year, guys. So everybody laughed at me and said, yeah, sure, Colin, sure you are. Right? And so, I started looking into what the training would entail. I mean, I already kind of thought about it a little bit, and, being from Massachusetts, right, the Boston Marathon is obviously something we're all very aware of, and think about, or I certainly did growing up, someday maybe. So I dove in. I mean, I still was partying on the weekends, or I'd do my long run on a Saturday or something, and then I'd still party that night, and wasn't perfect in a full, complete 180 right off the get-go. But, I really started to find joy again, and pleasure and focus, because I had, a new goal to shoot for. Right. And it was physical, right. So I was and even, I guess I should take one step back. I mean, I was going to the gym a couple of times a week, trying to improve my bench press, and stuff like that, and doing those kind of things. But at the end of the day, I really wasn't getting much satisfaction out of that. And it was kind of more just like almost an obligation or something that, just didn't really have too much purpose to me. So when I found running, that really helped me turn the corner. It was a slow roll for sure, but so I think that was in December of 2018. I'm sorry, 2008, not 18, 2008, that I started training, and I did run the Boston Marathon in 2009. So
you accomplished that goal. You accomplished that goal.
I did. That's so wanted to run under 4 hours, and I did achieve that. So it was a great experience. And really just prior to that, probably a month or two, I kind of was already kind of looking at what the next thing might be, and seeing people doing triathlons, and actually had a teacher at school that did an Ironman. And so like, we kind of saw his progression during school, and, it's like, oh, that seems pretty neat. And so I set my sights on a half Ironman later that year. And that's really when I found my stride, and I said, wow, this is awesome. Like, this is what I really enjoy, the diversity in training is right. You're not just running every day, you're swimming, you're biking, you're running, you can, I can go all kinds of tangents with the benefits of triathlon, or multi-sport, we call it, versus, a single sport. But I really just, with the only other thing certainly with mentioning is I did also find my wife, or meet my wife, kind of during that time that I was training for the marathon. And she's a very good girl, did not have the same habits that I did. And she wasn't willing to put up with those habits. So that certainly motivated me. And I mean, it was really for years, it was like I'd go on benders and wake up the next day and I was like, all right, that was the last time. And, really my life, I was working for a tech company, and, I'd party really hard Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night. And then, Sunday you'd sleep all day. And then like, you go to work, you'd just go to bed early, and like, you basically get yourself back to feeling normal. And then you do it all over again. And it was just, I went through that for years, and always kind of saying, I know I can do better than this. And, this isn't what I want to be. And, remember even having conversations with some of my brothers a few years older than me, like his friends, saying, I was saying, I'm not going to do this forever. And they're like, yeah, you will, whatever. And it was really kind of motivating to me to say, all right, I'm really not going to be one of those people, so but really having that purpose. And for me with triathlon, and certainly with running and a lot of these different sports, I'd say they are mainstream now, but not quite as mainstream as the four major sports, that gives you the opportunity to, you're competing against other people in your age group, right? So they have 5 to 10 year increments that you're racing against. So you can be competitive for the rest of your life if you want to be. So
I thought that was an interesting point that you made, and we'll get into the triathlon situation, because you're right. That's a great way that, you can always have this sport, right? So it's not like when you felt that feeling of, okay, my career is over. You hopefully won't have that feeling again, because this goes for a long time, doesn't it? Aren't there like up to probably, older? What's the highest age that there is?
So there's I believe a couple of years ago, there was a 81 or 82-year-old that finished Ironman World Championships.
Wow.
So it's, yeah.
We'll see. Here's to you, Colin. Yeah.
But, and to me, it is a lifestyle, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's about, sure, I am competitive, and I'm going out there to win, every time that I'm racing, but it is about living this lifestyle and being healthy. And, it's completely changed my life.
Yeah, that's awesome. Love hearing that story. Now that's not the only thing you do, as indicated by your titles. You're also now a triathlon coach. Tell me how that works and what you do in that role.
Yeah, so I have a triathlon coaching business called Peak Triathlon Coaching, and basically what it is, it's building training for an athlete as they prepare for a race or some kind of endurance event. So most of my clients are either doing half Ironmans or Ironmans, and so It's not really like a personal trainer where like I'm getting together with them. Like I have clients throughout the country. It's more about saying, all right, today's Monday, you're going to do a swim and, mobility workout, tomorrow you're going to hit the bike and you're going to do some strength training, and telling them to the T, what you want them to be doing in preparation for their race. And, understanding their strengths and weaknesses and, and building a program that's going to give them the best chance, to do their best.
That's awesome. I love hearing that. And I feel like the popularity of triathlons and maybe people becoming triathletes has increased in popularity. I've got a few friends, Sarah Fuller, yourself, Abby Christofich, Jared Shoemaker, by the way, was an Olympian. And I'm like, am I missing something here? Is there something I should know? Because it sounds like a lot of my friends are starting to get into it. Is it growing in popularity?
So it's interesting. It actually, according to some of the surveys and things, that it kind of peaked back in like the early tens there, 2011, 12, and then it kind of went down a little bit. And then, obviously COVID hit and, we didn't have any races for a full year. That certainly affected my business, pretty negatively. But since then it's gone up, and I feel like it is, at least in my community, is on the rise still, I think it's a lot of things. I think my story is pretty similar, where a lot of people may start out with running and then it's like, all right, they're looking to try something else. And then I have a lot of friends and clients that were very competitive runners, and now they've really turned to multi-sport and triathlon. So but to me, it's whatever makes you happy and keeps you content and inspired is what you should be doing. So whatever strain it is for you is all good with me.
Now I want to talk a little bit about the sponsorship side from an athlete branding perspective. Tell me about how these triathletes, especially who maybe struggle or might not be the best, are trying to get by, financially, or what they're doing or how they're supporting themselves.
Well, yeah, hopefully we're really going to see an uptick in that. But right now, I mean, I've coached a few of the lower end, kind of professionals, the struggling triathletes, that are just trying to make ends meet. And, even the ones that I would say, there's still some guys that are top 10 in the world that really aren't making much money, when you would think, that the top few guys definitely are doing pretty well, but even compared to certainly the four major sports, that's, laughable, really, financially anyways, and so there is actually the PTO, the Professional Triathlon Organization, has been formed about 3 years ago now. And, I think there's definitely some upside to that. And I didn't realize how big that potentially is. They actually compared it to like tennis way back in the day. I was actually at a meeting where they were formally announcing the PTO, and they compared it to tennis, where it really wasn't going very well, and people weren't making much money, and it was on kind of the fritz of heading out. And they formed an organization, a players organization, and it started booming from there. So hopefully we'll see a similar trajectory in triathlon. But yeah, I mean, a lot of the lower end pros, they're either working at least part-time, if not full-time jobs. A lot of them will do some coaching on the side, and then they're expected to be, I mean, most of these professionals train almost as many hours as people do working during the week.
That's what I'm saying. You got to squeeze it all in.
Yeah. It's a legitimate, you're just, instead of sitting on your butt here like we are, they're training away. So, but, to me and to my story, I guess, I have qualified a few times where I could have taken my pro card and I decided not to. And one of those reasons is, I think the first time I had 2 or 3 kids at that point, and I was making reasonable money in the cybersecurity world, and there's just way more upside for me, and providing for my family through the tech world than there is through racing triathlon, and probably getting my butt kicked, to be perfectly honest. So I made that, that decision, but I love, still trying to be competitive, and I certainly still, compare may not be the fair word, but certainly look at what times the pros are doing, and I try to get as close as I can to that, and find a lot of inspiration, from them. And as an age grouper, though, that's something I love. Yes, I have a lot going on in my life, and figuring out how to get everything in every day is a real joy that I I get to battle every day, which is good, and something that's been really helpful for me.
Absolutely. I wanted to talk about also the other side of things, and the fact that you obviously have a fitness center, and I want to hear more about this because I know you really help athletes, especially with recovery.
Yeah, definitely. So, I'm always looking for the latest and greatest kind of things to help myself and my clients to recover and, perform at their best. So, especially prior to COVID, my tech job would have me traveling a decent amount. So I'd be hitting up, major cities and going around, primarily staying on the eastern half of the US, but certainly traveling around and, getting the opportunity to see, and, some of these things maybe I saw on TV or, saw some of the pros doing, like cryotherapy, for example, if you're familiar, which is leveraging very cold temperatures to help reduce inflammation and speed up recovery. So I was able to start testing some of these things out, and I've always kind of had the entrepreneurial mindset, and kind of led me to saying, well, there's nothing around, in the southern New Hampshire area. But, things like float therapy in a sensory deprivation tank. So it's like it's a pod or a pool of water that has typically about 10 inches of water in it, and then has over 1,000 pounds of Epsom salt in it. So what you do is you go and you just lay in there for an hour. Typically, some of them do different durations, but both physically and mentally extremely beneficial. And that's probably my favorite, one of the recovery things that we have these days. But we also have some light therapy, infrared sauna, compression therapy. Most people may be familiar with Normatec or Hyperice now, and some of the things that they offer. So definitely the active person's wonderland when it comes to recovery.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Sounds like a playground for adults that have chronic pain.
Yeah, seriously, right? We don't know anybody in the world that has that.
Yeah, exactly. Wow, that's fantastic. Now, where's that located, Colin, so people know?
So that's in Manchester, New Hampshire. Yeah.
Excellent. All right, back to my Pirates days with the Verizon Arena there in Manchester.
Oh yeah, a little less than 10 minutes from there.
Oh, okay, very nice. Yeah, I spent a lot of time. Actually, that was the location. I had two things in my AHL career. You're a hockey guy, so I'm going to share these two things with you. One, they did a fireworks display, and they did the indoor fireworks, and one of the pieces of the fireworks caught one of their championship banners. Oh. And the thing started like going on fire, and they had to put out the fire. They had somebody up in the rafters putting the thing out. I couldn't believe that one. And the other funny story in Manchester was that we were there, and I'm trying to remember the mascots. Oh, it's Max, the mascot of the Monarchs at the time.
Okay, yeah.
He came out on the ice. I think it was one of the early games in the season, and he took a digger. So he falls, and his head comes off. Oh. You can imagine how these kids are looking at him like, oh my goodness, what happened to the poor mascot? So those are my two Manchester moments. Those are good ones. Yeah, those are good ones. So, but it talks about where we go in our career. Obviously, from what I did there with the Pirates and accomplishing, my dream to broadcast professionally, and now working with athletes and athlete branding. This is really a great fit for me. So let's talk about your podcast, because you've got a nice little bit of athlete brand you're building yourself as well.
Working on it. Yeah. Maybe need a little help from somebody, but definitely, something I enjoy. And so one of my assistant coaches and I have a podcast called Age Grouper for Life. So in triathlon, as a non-professional, you're kind of referred to as an age grouper. And so Age Grouper for Life is just basically that, you're committed kind of to the lifestyle and, have no, I shouldn't say no aspirations for professional, but you're living kind of that lifestyle where you typically have a full-time job and you're managing, training along with, family, job and all the other fun things that we deal with in our daily. So, which was funny. I did play a joke, or the first time we had the podcast going, when I first qualified to race professional, and so my coworker, my podcaster asked me if I was going to take my pro card, and I said, no way, man, I'm an age grouper for life, and had to represent. So
oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's a
But
great name for the
no,
podcast.
so we have, we'll interview different athletes, and people from around the world that we find to be inspiring, and only age groupers, right? So we don't have professionals on the show. And then we'll certainly pick up different topics where he and I will just talk about things triathlon related.
Very nice. I like that. And of course, Augusta, Maine will host an Ironman triathlon event in July. I'm really excited about it. And tell me about these kind of events. This is great for other triathletes, you say, that come from around the world.
They do. Yeah, we're super excited. So to have, we had heard rumor that Maine 70.3 was actually in Old Orchard Beach the last few years, and we heard it was getting pulled from there and they weren't going to be doing it. And actually in New England, there used to be a couple in New Hampshire. There used to be one in Providence. There was one in Connecticut. And they kept kind of trickling off and actually discontinuing these races, unfortunately. So for Ironman branded races, we were really down to Maine for a couple of years when it was in Old Orchard Beach. And then they did just bring back Timberman in Laconia, New Hampshire, this past year. But really that and Maine were the only events we had. So when we were losing that, we were pretty bummed, and we're very, very happy it's picked up in Augusta here. So we're looking forward to your hospitality here.
Oh, absolutely. We're looking forward to having you here in vacation land. So
Yeah.
that'll be good. Let's last but not least, you are extremely busy. You're obviously a very good dad. You're a great husband. Let's talk about your personal life. Talk to me about the one thing you love most about being a dad.
Just being, for me, I would say I enjoy my kids more and more every day as they get older and we get to do more things together. Coaching my oldest son's flag football team these days, that's a ton of fun. And we do go swimming every week together, and just being active with them, going out for hikes and different things. But anything I can do to help them hopefully be the best that they can be. And but it's a tough job, but it's a lot of fun, and really enjoy it.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. I think that I've found that as well, is sharing your passions with your kids can really bring out the best in you and the best in them, because they actually really start to enjoy it. I don't know if you know, but Kelsey, my daughter, loves broadcast. She's like she's a junior broadcaster at this point. She's got her own YouTube channel. We did a podcast episode. We evaluated all 32 NFL logos. We had a blast. I mean, when you get a 10-year-old talking about like these logos and the whiskers for the Panthers and everything else, I mean, it's good. It's a hilarious episode, but it's so true. So like, you don't get a better perspective than a 10-year-old who's ready to just tell you anything. Like they're not going to hold back. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
so,
no, totally.
And
you reminded me too for my kids. So actually my youngest still isn't quite old enough, but they do a youth triathlon in Bedford, New Hampshire. And I was able to get all three of my boys to do that race. And my oldest started doing it at 5. And I was almost, fighting back the tears as he was out there doing it. And he did some funny things. And then my second child is autistic, and, he's semi high function, but I was able to get him, and we did the race together this year. And it was a very special day, to see all three of them out there doing it. And especially for Eli, my second one, to get through. It wasn't easy, but we did it.
Oh, that is a really cool story, Colin. And I think that's a great note to end on. And I want to, again, thank you for making the time, because I know you're a busy guy, and I'm looking forward to building on what we've started here, because I think there's a lot of ways that we're going to be able to help not only each other, but I think a lot of people who listen to this are going to be inspired, and hopefully they learn something new. They contact you, certainly, if they are a triathlete or thinking about anything in their career that you can certainly help them with. I got to get to Manchester. That's what I know. I got to do that. So we'll find a way. We'll find a way to make that happen. But I want to say again, thanks again for coming on the podcast, and keep up the great work. Okay.
Thanks so much, Greg. It's you'll always be the voice of Quinnipiac, the Bobcats, and hockey in my mind. So to hear your voice the last few weeks here has been pretty awesome.
No, I appreciate that, Colin. And there, for those of you tuning in, I'm Greg Glynn. Glad you could tune in and stay pliable, my friends.
Thanks for listening to the Athlete Brand Advisor Podcast. Be sure to check out the show notes from today's episode and catch up on recent episodes at pliablemarketing.com. We also encourage you to share topics and guest ideas by emailing our production staff at pliablemarketing@gmail.com. We love hearing from our loyal listeners and athletes who want to grow their brand. So jump in and be part of the podcast, because that's how we roll.